now that we've got our first text block in place, we're going to go on to creating an image gallery, and we're going to put that again in a section tag, or a set of section tags. So that will be the container that goes around the outside of all of those images. So that'll allow us to change the width of that whole container. So say we want the images just to fill up half of the page, we could do that. If they wanted to go 100% of the width of the page, we could do that easily as well, just by changing the width of that container class that goes around those images. And that class name is going to be defined in the opening section tag for this part here. Before we do that though, we're going to have a look at how we can resize images using Photoshop. So I've loaded up one of the images that I want to use, and I'm just going to go to Image up the top and go to Image Size, and then I can change the width to 500 pixels, because I've already worked out that's about what I'm going to want my images to be on my website. I make sure that we've got constrained proportions checked so that the aspect ratio of our image stays the same, and I click OK, and you can see it gets a lot smaller now. So now I'm going to go to File and Save As, and I'm in the original images folder here with all of my other images, so I'm just going to go up and then into my thumbnail image folder, and I'll just change the name of that so it's Lake Thumb, so that I know when I'm putting these images into my website that I'm using the right one. So I'll click Save, and I'll leave it as the maximum size for the JPEG. That's fine. And now if we just go back to our folder on our hard drive, if I look in the original images folder and I just click on that image, and I look down the bottom here, you can see that the size of that image is 2.55 megabytes, which is quite large. But if I go to my thumbnail folder now and click on that one, you can see it's down to 157 kilobytes. So a massive saving in terms of the amount of data that we're going to ask our users to download. So it's definitely worth optimizing your images before we upload them to the website. So let's go and have a look at how we can create our image gallery. So as I mentioned at the start, we're going to create a new section. So under that previous section that we had, let's put in a new section tag, and we'll give it another class name. And this time I'll call it Image Gallery. We try to really make sure we use appropriate and meaningful class names so that when we come back to our CSS later on, it's easy for us to find the section that we were working in. Okay, so I'm going to put in my image tag, source src, type my equals, and it comes up with my different folders. Now remember, because these are going to be the small images on our website, we're going to choose from the thumbnails folder. And I'm just going to choose the Lake Thumb option at the moment. That's the only one that I've got in there. If I hover my mouse over there, you can see that that's the correct image, and you can see also the resolution 500 by 375 pixels that we have for that image. So let's check our live preview, see how that's looking. We've got our nice big image at the front, we've got our main text sliding up over the top of that, and then we've got our single image in on the left like that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through with those other images and resize them in Photoshop, put them into the thumbnail folder and rename them, and then I'm going to just duplicate that line of code that I've got here down the bottom. I'm going to duplicate that line of code, but of course change the image that I'm referring to, so I've got 8 of those images in a row. So I'm going to pause the video while I do that now. Right, so I've got all my images in there. I've got all 8 of them in there, and now I'm going to go over to my CSS and put in some rules for this image gallery class that we've just made to try and format those images appropriately. So again, down the bottom of our CSS, we'll start with the class name, of course prefixed by that full stop, and then we have our curly brackets as always. So for this image gallery, I'm going to start by saying I want to have the width of it, so the width of that container that we're going to put those images in, I'm going to set that to 90%, because I want to have it nice and big even when the window is full screen. So in the previous section we talked about how we could set the maximum width overall to 1200 pixels. Because these are going to be images, I want it to fill up most of the screen anyway, so I'm going to go with 90% no matter what the width of the window is. So now remember, we've only just changed the width of the image gallery section. We haven't actually affected the width of the images themselves. So I'm going to make another rule, and this time it's going to apply to the image gallery class, but then the images, so the IMG tags within that class. So this is going to apply to the actual images themselves. I'm going to give them a width, and I'm going to specify it in percentages, so I'm going to give it 22% for now. Okay, so now if we have a look at our live preview, you can see that we've got all of those images in place. They're all the same width, and they're all lined up on the left at the moment, but we're going to change that in a minute. If I want to play around with the widths of those images, I can of course change the percentage down here. If I change it to 25%, you can see that it does wrap onto the next line. Now, because there's 4 images and they're 25%, you might think that all fit on the same line, but of course we've got this margin in between that's causing that issue to wrap around. So I'm going to put it down to, let's say, 24%, and you can see we've got those 4 images on one line. That's looking good like that. Okay, so now we need to try and center this whole section in the middle. So remember, if we think about how we structured our HTML, we have this section tag that goes around all of those images, and it's a container that contains those images. So we need to center that whole section first before we worry about those images. So if we go back to our CSS, this is the name of that class that has that container, or that is that container, and if we set the margin to 0 and auto, you can see straight away that that has worked and it's moved across into the center. If you look really closely though, you can still see on the right hand side that there's a little bit more of a gap here because of the percentages that we used when we set up those images. If we then go full screen, you can see a little bit more obviously that actually now, despite the fact that section is set up in the middle, because we've got this little bit of extra space on the right hand side, our images aren't quite in the middle, but it's quite straightforward to fix those. We just need to add a rule to our gallery, which is, remember, that class name for that container, and we're going to set the text alignment to center. Now that might seem a little bit strange that we're seeing text alignment, but it's aligning all of the content within that image gallery class. And now if you look here, you can see with those blue lines that represent the edges of that container, those images are in the middle. And because we set them to a width of 22%, when we go to a big screen like this, you can see that they fill up the whole screen as we'd like. You could of course use fixed pixel amounts for these widths. So if we say, for example, 150 pixels, they're a lot smaller. And then when we go to full screen, they'll all be on one line. So you need to be a bit careful if you're going to use fixed widths for your images. There's nothing to say that you can't, but it just will mean if people are resizing your windows and things, they'll start looking a little bit different. So I'm going to put this back to 22% because I'm pretty happy with how that looked, with having 4 on one line and having 2 rows like that. So that'll do it for this video. We've got a nice little image gallery in there. Later on we might look at putting some hover effects on them and also putting links on them, anchor tags, so that when you click on them it takes you through to the full resolution version of those images. But for now, in the next video we're going to move on to making another background image in a new section.